Hello again, Michael Hedges, CEO of ScriptLink, discussing what we provide as far as proposal services. Again, using an example of um, workforce solutions specific to what we are doing. Let's see. And we have one sample here, a sample proposal for adult dislocated worker and youth services. Um, just to give a rundown, generally we have a number of different sections and we'll go over each that we should place within our proposal as far as the narrative. When it comes to attachments, things of that effect, usually that's going to involve pulling from outside sources within our company, within the client's company, as far as getting the information we need, depending on what those attachments entail. They could be, again, related to past performance, they could be letters of support, they could be also budget information. So we want to know from the RFP, of course, page length, whether it's double spaced, single spaced, what is the font size, general arrangements, can we have graphics, do we have a limit to page length or even character length, which those are fun because you have to really squeeze a lot of information into a very small space. Also, is there a transmittal letter, an inquiry letter, to be honest? That's basically what transmittal letter is. And you're going to have all the information as far as what the overall proposal response is about, what it refers to as far as the RFP number, what is the population being served, what the programs that are going to be provided, and then the point of contact that we also want to put into the letter, and any other given information that is required. So this is usually the general format here, as you can see. So we'll have usually our logo for the funder or reference to them. Well, or in this case, we could have here, as we see, the logo for our company or the company that would be the client's company. And then here would be the representation of the actual RFP. And usually above adult dislocated worker, we would have the funder's name. So, of course, we make sure our date is correct. We are still in the month of June for this example. And then we'll have the contract office address, their phone, their email, the contract office representative, usually their name and actual title, and then address throughout this particular transmittal letter the information I stated earlier, what the program is, what the population is, who we are, how we'll support that, and essentially the reasons why we should already be considered to win the contract. We don't want to be long winded, but we want to be thorough and we want to address key areas that are of value to the funder. And we want to make sure we're compliant according to what should be in those letters within the RFP if they are specified. Um, and then we also want to provide the person that would be considered the point of contact. A little bit of a typo here, but we do want to definitely put the person of contact, their information, which would usually be a president or CEO. Um, we provide an executive summary, and within that, we address the history of the company, the offer that is looking to win the contract from the funder, um, the history, the number of individuals working for the company. So, how big is the workforce? um, Highlight strategies, areas of performance, quality assurance, innovations, anything that basically reflects on the capacity of the company to perform and to address how that capacity will be custom to what the funder wants as far as the operation of the program. So, and as we continue, when we talk about performance here, we want to weave that in with innovation. We want to talk about best practices and evidence-based practices and how, and through experience, what we have learned, what we've improved. If we have to address areas of improvement or areas of mm, maybe when negative results may have come about, the best thing is never to address them in a negative fashion, but an area of growth, an area of improvement, which entail connects to the innovations that have been made to improve a situation and move forward to perform best to serve the participants of a given funder within their given programs. We also want to provide information on the population's performance as far as usually educational and training certifications, and then moving on to actual job placement, how much was made by the general worker, and how many of those actual workers continue to be in their placement position, specifically for WIOA programs, workforce programs. So again, that's just our executive summary. We usually have a lot more space, but for the sake of this example, I kind of condensed a number of different things here. But we'll talk about organizational history and capacity, as I stated earlier, address the number of employees, how many states they're in. Um, we want to look at who is the leadership, what kind of revenue is made, usually in the most recent year, unless we do have, for instance, if we're looking at fiscal year versus calendar year, sometimes we can address the actual year we're in and know how much we're worth if there have been changes. For instance, in this example, we have 7 billion, but let's say with it being June, it might end up being a situation where we may have gotten another $500 million. So then it would be 7.5 billion. So we always want to keep numbers like that up to date, the number of employees up to date, the number of states or districts that we're in up to date, and also the number of contracts we have in a specific program up to date. Let's see, any kind of awards. Again, address all kinds of areas of compliance. As we get further into this example, we'll have to address, the support of ADA, EEO, and also any kind of transparency that we need in order to best serve underrepresented groups. So, as far as program design, that's usually how we're going to carry out the particular programs, as what we offer, what results we're looking for. So if we're looking at WEX, that's work experience. Um, Work-based learning would be WBL, OJT, on the job training, ITAs, individual training, accounts, and BSC is usually our business services, and that entail is more of how we involve partners within the programs in order to best support the funder. So BSC is kind of out of place with these in this example, but our BSC capacity is not so much focused on participants within a program, but it is focused on how we acquire partners who we will then partner with our participants, and they will serve in those programs. For instance, if ABC Company partners with DEF and DEF has work experience or WEX programs, we have to go about, well, how's that going to work out? What actual performance is DEF expecting of the participants? How would that be assessed? Things to that effect. So we're also going to look at different programs and platforms used to um, gather information such as labor market information, LMI. And in this case, most companies will use Jobs EQ, and that'll give statistics of different areas where there's the highest amount of unemployment. But then there are other reports that'll show, okay, these are leading market industries where they're focused in a particular municipality. Again, it could be city, a county, a region, which could be a number of counties, or even a state. where are those jobs? Uh, what are the major companies that are hiring that we can be involved with or reach out to, again, through our business services in order to satisfy WEX, WBL, OJT, and ITAs. Um, and then as we continue, we talk about who actually assists in this. So our career navigators, and a lot of times there'll be differences in how those positions are explained. They might be talent development specialists. That's one term some companies may use. But basically, people who will assist the participants in getting, within educational programs, later training programs, and then actual job placement. And then they work in tandem alongside the business service consultants who also work or have a meaningful relationship with participants, but they are somewhat liaisons that work with partners in order for the participants to benefit from our partners' programs. As far as youth, as I stated earlier, I believe in the other video, in school youth and out school youth, you're going to look at different things that they need, but how is it going to be addressed? If you have OSY, what is, out of school youth, what are differences that they may receive versus adult dislocated worker? Adult dislocated worker, again, and out of school youth are similar in age, usually around 18 to like the early 20s. Okay, so we still have to consider with each population, what are the specificities that we need to address from the WIOA or the workforce perspectives in each program to satisfy their needs. We also want to look at areas of um, providing support in areas to address needs that basically enable people to work effectively, learn effectively, be trained effectively. So we're looking at local housing assistance. We're looking at substance use assistance. It could be mental health, physical health. What other things can we do to better assist them? So again, we for this example, we do have things such as motivational interviewing and trauma counseling, which are major factors in trying to first extract information from a participant, learn them as an individual, and then see how best to help them from a custom presentation of program support. And that would be a matter of facing those barriers that they may meet, which could be, again, barriers usually are tied to any form of underrepresentation. So those could be racial, those could be gender based, those could be based on orientation, certain religious um, minorities or people outside of the general religion of a particular given area. It could be financial challenges, again, substance use, things to that effect. Those are barriers that we have to, in this case, write about how best to address to get participants through trauma and adversity and get them the best support they need in order to get placed in programs and, again, work these jobs, perform their best, and then become permanent members of the workforce again within our society. Um, and then as we continue, this again being part of our program design, we lead into past performance. And with past performance, we're going to provide information specific to contracts that we have completed. Preferably always pick those that were in, say, 1 to 3 years in the past. Preferably performance that is near 100% satisfaction for the second and fourth quarter, and also more of the high end or high value contracts. So if we have one that's, say, 100,000 for workforce services, that may not be a lot. But if we say, oh, this was an 8 million, 10 million, 300 million, which they are out there, um, contract, then the focus is how well do we perform? How do we handle different kinds of challenges? Um, what was, how do we handle any kind of personal conflicts that might have arose or arose between clients and actual people in the centers. So again, these are things that, say, your company would tell Scriptling, how do we best present or spin in such fashion to make things always a positive and always a point of collaboration, transparency, and openness with the funder to again show how best your company will perform and carry through the particular contract once it is won. Barrier removal, self-explanatory. Assessments are going to be connected to education and training. So one particular one is the CASAS, which is Comprehensive Adult Student Assessment Systems, which is one particular assessment. We also have TABE, which is a test of uh, adult basic education, GED, high school equivalent test, which is the HiSET. So those are pretty much the main ones that are considered just to get the educational part. But then when getting into particular fields, then there are training programs specific to those, whether they be could be welding, could be carpentry, could be general forms of overall professional management or other technical fields, IT. Those will differ, but those need to be addressed specifically to again show the array of means to support participants that are looking to get back into the workforce permanently. Customer flow should basically reflect the program design in the sense of how will the program design be put in place? What is the uh, progression of the particular participant, or in this case, customer, through that particular program? What are the benchmarks, expectations, and how will we go through that, say, within a whole year, the whole contract? So it might be again the very beginning, education, then getting them in the training programs, and having them in uh, a work experience program, which may be with or without pay, depending on how it's arranged. And then, of course, the permanent program where they're finally getting paid. And then also addressing 12 months after with a follow up, making sure that, yes, they've been through the program. How are you doing? If they, again, if we have clients that unfortunately have faced substance use, we want to make sure that they're not having any kind of relapse. If they have been justice involved, we want to make sure that they're not facing recidivism, which puts them back in the same cycle. So that is still part of the customer flow. And the customer flow, again, is going to kind of illustrate how the program design is implemented from beginning to end throughout the contract. Also, we do want to address what specific performers or persons within the company will be assisting each individual participant throughout the program. Once we're dealing with partnerships, again, we have to look at things such as memorandums of understanding, and that's so we don't have um, duplication of services, which takes service from others if we have that happen. Um, and also, it's a waste of money if you duplicate services. So that's one thing that has to be established through MOUs. Also, how partners will be trained so everyone is aligned accordingly, and a number of other things. And usually, partners will include they can include non-WIOA partners, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, legal advisors, subject matter experts, policymakers, and leading companies in the area. So all those being involved will provide a 360 view of how best to serve the participants within the program. So let's see here. And as we continue, we go to the staffing model as I addressed in the other video. And that's basically what is the chain of command, what is the governance structure, And then as we go down, financially, we'll say the project accountant, what specific support or activities um, to maintain compliance do we have? What processes do we use to make sure there's transparency and again compliance? So here I do talk about GAAP and OMB, and of course SOX or Sarbanes-Oxley. I always have trouble with that, but those are specific regulations that we have to have in order to have full compliance. Of course, we do go further down the staffing model to show how specific programs, in this case, job programs, will be carried out, and who will lead those as far as the chain of command. The general governance is going to be the general part of our company. But when we get into programs, we do want to say, okay, we have a lead career navigator. How many navigators will work under that particular individual? How will they work with the business service consultants or other members of teams? And then the separation of different programs that may be addressed by different members of the company. Detail is always important in that fashion. If it's too generalized, it doesn't sound like you have the experience and you don't really know what you're talking about. So the more detail provided, um, in other words, the more transparency provided and explanation, we better show uh, not only capacity, but skill and attention to detail and values that funders want to know that the company has. So again, to better serve the programs and the participants within them. As we continue to say outreach, and that's usually okay. How are you attracting participants? So that could be all kinds of promotions, different kinds of um, work service events, which could be job fairs, could be a matter of just contacting people at different kinds of social events, or even um, outreach sites, which could be, if not within an actual work service office, it could be at a library or different areas in the community. For instance, for populations that may have a travel barrier or distance barrier where they're not able to come to, say, the actual workforce center, or if you're doing one stop, it's a one stop center. Um, so, how do you reach them? And again, I do have different areas in this particular example where we might talk about reaching potential participants for a program through social media, QR codes, mobile apps, and also a well-designed web page that potential participants can see themselves involved in. And then you also have not only job seekers, but partners and supporters who also want to be uh, considered to work together with your company in particular to best serve those programs. And then as far as quality assurance, that is where you're looking at liability and responsibility, or I guess you would say liability and accountability, um, to perform at the highest, to monitor that performance, to consider any areas of improvement, because we don't want to use weakness. We don't use that word or anything negative, but we do want to always continuous um, improvement is one of the main things that funders want to see. Even if you're at 100, you're continuing to maintain 100 and excel expectations. So how do you do that? So of course, in this case, we're using this particular program as an example, such as Power BI, Oracle, and depending on who, you can develop your own continuous quality improvement tool. That's usually any kind of internal programs that your company may have to always show a progression. If you're not showing progression, that means you're not really moving, and that's considered stagnant by a number of funders. So there always has to be something in place as far as what can be improved, what can be changed, or um, there's never a point at which there's a perfect operation within a program. The operation has to always be monitored, checked, adjusted, so that performance can be essentially perfect, but we want to make sure that the quality assurance and the actual tools that are used are recognized for their value, and that we explain how best they are used for the funder to understand that we are again taking liability and accountability for performance and the outcomes involved when it comes to their programs and their given participants. And then we, of course, talk about performance assessment. And that's where the company kind of takes a seat in front of the participants, or in this case, customers, any kind of employer partners that the employer partners that we provide participants for, and of course, the funder, and even internally the staff surveys. So even to say your company, you need to know how your own staff feels about the performance and different exchanges and events that take place with the performance of a contract or service or program. So those are considered a lot of times by funders a way to make sure that the company, or in this case the offer, has programs in place for, or platforms in place for self-evaluation. Of course, we're talking about corporations, not the individuals, but how does ABC, as far as our company, our example, how's ABC doing? Well, ABC is going to know how it's doing in accordance with customer surveys, surveys from partners, surveys from funders, and again, surveys from ABC employees. So And then location is where we look at central locations and satellite locations. So, for instance, depending on populations, depending on the physical size of a particular central location, will we be able to house all of those participants? Will we have mobility? Do we have, I mean, it can get down to enough bathrooms, water, areas where anything that's going to make the participants and staff comfortable and functional, as well as making sure that we are ADA compliant. Always want to make sure that that's in place and focused upon so that we can support members who, again, are trying to get around ability barriers. So, and how to help them through that. So, always look at uh, what tools or technology or even just structures are there, ramps, is there audio visual assistance, and even if someone has cognitive ability challenges, how do we assist them? If they are not a native English speaker, how do we address that? How many people do we have on staff who will be able to be bilingual or multilingual to address a number of different individuals at that particular location? And again, that has to align with staff, the staff model, what team members will be in that staff, and where they can be relocated or where they can be leveraged for their capacity to perform. So we have a central location, but a support location, and we do have, let's say, people who speak um, different dialects of, say, let's say it's Mandarin and Cantonese, and maybe we have some Haitian Creole, and we may have, let's say, different dialects of Spanish, but at different support centers, or what we call access points. They're not at the central location. How do we access them? We'll later get into sort of the schedules, but we have to make sure that all that kind of flows together in order to make sure that the funder understands that this is going to be very streamlined, very organized. There's not a lot of room for either um, discrepancies of not knowing, not having the information, or just not having a plan in place. So then we get into the explanation of what is the transition plan. If we're an incumbent, we don't really have a transition plan, but we do have areas of where we're going to improve, where we're going to make changes, where are we going to expand. But if we're new, then we want to look at the transition plan of, do we hire some of the previous staff in order to have the best transition, because they'll know the system, they'll know the participants, they know the program and the funder, and that's a value if you're a new company taking over. Or if we don't want to do that, how best can we reflect how we take on the actual contract within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180, 270, and then of course our 360, 365. So we want to look at the particular points at which values need to be reported, updates, things to that effect. And that is part of the transition plan. And usually transition plans only really address the beginning, the first 30 days, the first 60 days. But it is always good to show either what will be continuously done, say like different kinds of meetings with the funders or partners, which might be handled every week. Um, Say with partners, there'll be quarterly meetings, of course. Then with each quarterly meeting, there may be a semi-year and annual as far as closing. Also, with transitional plans, we do show how there will be a point at which the contract ends. How will we close the program? How will we move forward from that? So there's kind of beginning, middle, end within the transitional plan. Innovations always are best to reflect going above and beyond, or beyond expectations of what's within RFP. The funder may have other expectations that aren't in the RFP. So to see such innovations that might address things that they did not put in there or weren't thinking of is always good. Innovations can be in how best to attract a certain population and maintain a relationship with that population. And that can be cultural events, that can be interest events, that can be beyond just job events, different innovations there, or programs in which partners are acquired for a particular population. What is the innovation? Is it through schools, secondary schools? Is it through training programs? What is it that we can create a space to better serve different members that are facing certain barriers or have certain specific needs within a program? Of course, we provide our references, which usually is already connected to our past performance, but usually the differences with past performance, we're talking about what actually took place and the outcomes, whereas references might get into more of like letters of support, where we're having the funders we did perform for, state to a new funder that the company is, of high quality, very agreeable, and basically it's sort of the thumbs up to say, hey, these people are good and they are worthy of winning the contract. Um, Getting into the last parts of, say, the technical budget, that's usually with that, or excuse me, the technical proposal, that's without end. So I kind of merged two different areas of the proposal, because once we get to the budget proposal, that would be a different section, but there's still a narrative element. And usually business analysts will provide all of the uh, spreadsheet information or statistical information, and that'll be broken down to staff members, their particular income, the percentage of time they'll be there as far as what they call FTE. So that's the time that they are going to spend there. Is it going to be 100% of the time, 50%, 5%? And that's aligned with what their income is. And also, we want to look at, try to make the budget believable. Don't inflate it, don't add to it, and don't keep rewriting it to the point where there are new problems created, because that's something that can kind of really throw off a proposal, as far as getting it done in a timely manner and getting it ready for review and submission. So the budget should be really one of the main points to be focused upon. And in some fashions, it should be done as immediately after your kickoff meeting. So kickoff meeting, everybody's meeting everybody. You should have your budget meeting, then have your strategy meetings. Then, of course, once you get your first draft and address what needs to be changed, and then move on to the second draft, the final draft, and then getting approval. That should be the chain of, I guess, progress at that point. But the budget, a lot of times, the mistake that some companies make is to have budget meetings and the budget narrative addressed sort of later in the proposal process. And again, your budget determines, you know, how much staff you're going to have, who you can afford, if you have rent, what locations are available, because sometimes certain locations aren't available. You might have to spend more money. So getting out the question going through everybody's head, how much, including the funder, how much is best to get out the way first, and then allow the technical proposal to reflect in more detail, you know, who's doing what, but the budget needs to address the how much question. Um, let's see. And pretty much that is the fullness of the example. We may provide a conclusion for both sections, which would be, again, technical was everything from reference to the above, all the way up to our transmittal letter. And of course, the budget proposal would be here, just a narrative example from there. Any other information that we would provide in closing, we can provide conclusions for both sections, but in closing, we usually would have different attachments, letters of support, anything that would be outside of the required number of pages or characters specified. And again, make sure that when reviewing the RFP, there is a point of addressing the specific things that are demanded by the funder. If the funder allows actual attachments in certain sections, that is fine. But if it's not, don't just add things, because again, that can be considered non-compliant. And if you're non-compliant, you don't win. So again, really did appreciate providing these videos as a means to inform a number of clients, whether you're a current client or future client. We will definitely have a number of others to present. Again, my name is Michael Hedges, CEO of ScriptLink, and I thank you for your support.